everyone, I'm Keely Sacker with Theogony, T.C. Williams' student-run media organization. Welcome to today's episode of Behind the Headlines. We're coming to you from the Alexandria City Public Schools television studio at T.C. Williams with a roundtable discussion with local journalists. Let's meet our panel. Michael Pope is a reporter for the Virginia Public Radio. Denise Dunbar is an editor and the publisher for the Alexandria Times. And Dan Brendel is a reporter for the Alexandria Gazette. Let's kick off our discussion with the issue of the scooters. If you walk through Old Town or anywhere else in Alexandria, you will see the streets lined with electric scooters. In a recent op-ed in the Alexandria Times, residents of Alexandria had a lot to say about how the scooters are an annoyance and a safety hazard. Michael, do you believe that these scooters have a negative or positive effect on Alexandria, and are they here to stay?
Have you been on a scooter?
Yes.
Did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it very much.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think the reaction you get from people who have been on them is they seem to like them and that they are useful. Your question was, are they here to stay? That's yet to be seen. A lot of that has to do with the economics. You may remember a year and a half ago, there was the issue of the dockless bicycles. So not the Capital Bike Share, which has docks, but there are all these bicycles that were dockless. I can't remember the last time I saw one of the dockless bicycles. I mean, that thing, you had all these investors throw a bunch of money at all these different brands, and they were everywhere, and then they sort of disappeared. One would imagine because people didn't use them, and it wasn't sort of economically profitable for the companies that did them. So are they here to stay? We don't really know that because we're in a pilot program right now. They are fun to ride, which is sort of universally the reaction you get from people who have been on them. But are they safe? We need to see the stats on that. How many people use them? We need to see the stats on that. And ultimately, do they make money for these companies? We have yet to really know that.
Denise, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I do. I have a lot to add on this subject. So there's a killjoy in every crowd, and I'm more than happy to play that part. I actually think that whether or not they're fun is completely irrelevant. What is the question here is whether or not they're appropriate for the city of Alexandria. What does the city of Alexandria stand to gain from these? I live and work in the heart of Old Town, and I can tell you that daily I see underage people riding these. Sometimes they're on the sidewalks, which is illegal in Alexandria. Sometimes they're in the street. They're always without helmets.
Not always.
Well, I've not seen anybody on a helmet, and I've probably seen at least 100 people riding them. So maybe you guys did, but in general, they're not, and they're not designed for people to be able to ride helmets. They're supposed to be hop on and hop off. You walk along, you impulsively hop on a scooter, you go, ride whatever, a mile, and you have your good time, and you leave your scooter. I have as we cited in the editorial, I have a friend who lives in the Rosemont section of town on a side street, not any, several blocks from Russell Road. She came out one morning and there was a scooter in the flower bed in her yard. That's really not appropriate. And, we cited in the Alexandria Times in the recent story that we did, we're doing a series, an 83-year-old woman who came out of her house or her condo. There were a bunch of them piled up on the sidewalk in front of her house, and she tripped on them. Mm-hmm. What is Alexandria gaining from this? I think that's the question that needs to be asked.
Well, would you suggest removing them altogether from Alexandria or installing more of like a better management system and maybe even like a helmet system?
So I'm going to give away what I think is going to be a future editorial in the Alexandria Times, which is we're in the midst of a 9-month pilot program. We're a few months into that. I personally think that the pilot either needs to be stopped or it needs to be radically altered and a very different system put in place for the remainder of it. I think in the first few months of this pilot, we have established that the current situation of just anarchy is not working. There are permits for up to 1,400, actually more than 1,400 because they can actually get more depending on usage. So more than 1,400 scooters are permitted in Alexandria right now. There's no accountability. It's harmful to the aesthetics in the city, and it's a safety hazard. And so what I would do is a radically different approach for the rest of the pilot. I would strategically put corrals where the only places where they can be picked up and dropped off, and really strictly enforce the safety issues.
Dan?
I have ridden one. I did not wear a helmet. I yield the rest of my time to I mean, I can appreciate it both ways. I have ridden them. I have had fun. I personally, I'm not really that against them. I found them to be a little pricey to the economics of it. I would not, you could ride one of those things like 10 times and pay for your own. That's probably not true, but I wouldn't make it part of my regular commute. But I did have fun. To Denise's comment about anarchy, sure, I can see that, but I would say that that's not a scooter problem. That's just like a transportation mobility problem. Recently, Michael and I had lunch, and I took a scooter to go have lunch with him because I was running late. And as I was walking down the sidewalk to get, I live in Old Town also, Solis City streets. As I was walking to go pick up my scooter, like an 18-wheeler big rig blew through a stop sign right by my house, right by my neighbor who has a 2-year-old daughter, like it wasn't even there. So if it's an issue of anarchy and safety, I'm a lot more worried about the 18-wheeler blowing through my stop sign
than a scooter.
And cars.
And hitting a scooter.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody's, if you live in Old Town, if you ever travel in Old Town, nobody obeys the rules. Pedestrians, bicyclists, cars at rush hour time is like absolute anarchy. So that is a problem, absolutely, but it's a problem that's bigger than just that one thing.
Just piggybacking here on the point that Denise made, which is the docklessness of these things, right? So the Capital Bike Share had docks, and the city actually spent a whole lot of time and effort figuring out exactly where they want to put the docks. And so these things just threw all that sort of time and effort into the garbage can because you can sort of abandon them anywhere, which is the pro, and that's one of the reasons that people like them to an extent. Denise was saying wouldn't it be great if there was an area where you could corral them and sort of you could pick them up from kind of specified locations and leave them in specified locations, like for example around Capital Bike Share stations. That might be a smart idea. So that's something that the city should think about. Another thing is that since you previewed an upcoming editorial in the Alexandria Times, I'll also preview something that I would like to see, which is the folks here at T.C. Williams, the television production crew, following around Denise Dunbar of the Alexandria Times to get video of her riding a scooter for the first time. Are you on for that?
If it would help students, I would do it, but only if I could wear a helmet.
Well, I appreciate that, Denise. All right, so let's turn our discussion to the halal butchery. In a very controversial recent 5-2 city council vote, city council approved a butchery where they will slaughter poultry on site for customers. Denise, do you believe that the hurt feelings will still linger, or what are your feelings on this decision?
I'm not really as concerned about feelings as I am about the impact on the businesses surrounding this. There's the closest other halal butchery is 52 miles away in a much less urban location, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason that the other cities and counties in our immediate surroundings have ordinances on the books. It's just really not appropriate for Alexandria. I personally was disappointed on several levels that this passed. The first reason is just that our city councilors really never say no to any development proposal, and so I was really hoping that maybe this would be the one that they would say no to, but they didn't. The second thing is, and the most important thing is really the impact of surrounding businesses. There are a lot of dog care places in the immediate vicinity, and our new Vice Mayor, Elizabeth Bennett Parker, did a lot of research on this issue and actually traveled to Philadelphia and to other locations where this same operator has other operations, and found that people who were around it were not really very happy with that. And I don't think that the businesses surrounding this are going to be happy.
Dan?
Yeah, well, I reviewed my notes before I came here. Somebody correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but what I recall of that was that the issue at hand was not whether, what the city council ultimately decided, I think, or the majority decided in approving it, was that there wasn't really, even if they didn't, like Councilwoman Del Pepper, for example, did not want that land use, but she said, I don't see any legal reason why they can't do this, so that if we deny this to them, that would be like a highly arbitrary, a highly arbitrary denial. And Mayor Wilson's support of it was to say, hey, look, if you want to have, you know what zoning is, like laws that control the use of land. Well, that particular area of the city has what is a pretty permissive, you know, zone. And so he said, if we want to change the character of this neighborhood, then we can do that, but there's a process for that, you know, rezoning and doing what's called a small area plan, and it's involved. But he said he didn't think it was appropriate or maybe even legal to do that on the fly, like specific to one particular business's land use decision. So he said if we want to do that, then there's a political process and we can do that, but that's not, the political process isn't here tonight when they were making that decision.
You know, the thing that strikes me about this particular decision is that for the elected officials, it's kind of temporary. They considered it, they made their decision, and they moved on to different things. For the business owner that had the special use permit approved, they have to live with their neighbors. And that's where things can get really difficult, because it's not just that there are sort of lingering hurt feelings about this. They've got to deal with the potential smells and to a lesser extent traffic issues. I think traffic issues might have been kind of a red herring. But if you think about the vice mayor, Denise mentioned that she did some research, and our vice mayor, Elizabeth Bennett Parker, went to Philadelphia to visit some of these other very similar institutions. And when she talked to the neighbors, and the neighbors all complained about smells. Well, you know, I think when this thing is up and it's running, I think you're going to find some of those neighbors will be unhappy for years to come, potentially, and that could have lingering problems in this neighborhood.
One other thing, I think an interesting aspect of this is the political aspect of it. This came up at a public hearing at which 2 of the 7 members of City Council were not present. So there were actually 3 councilors, so there were only 5 there total. There were 3 councilors at that public hearing who were, it was clear from their comments, they were, at least at that time, opposed to this. So they had the votes to defeat it at that public hearing, and they didn't. Instead, they deferred it. And then when the other 2 councilors who were absent from the public hearing came back and it was raised at a subsequent legislative meeting, then it passed. And Del Pepper changed her position in the interim. But they actually had the votes to defeat this, and whether it was because these council members were new, they didn't take their chance to defeat it.
Don't you think that would have looked bad, though, that for them to defeat this SUP because you had 2 absent members?
Especially when they have no legal standing to do so.
Well, they had legal
I
standing.
think they wouldn't have come before them if they didn't.
I think they would have made the case they had legal standing to do it.
Right.
But I mean, the real question is that sort of from a political standpoint, from democracy, small d, democracy standpoint, would that have the right thing? Would that have been the right thing to do?
I mean, you have public hearings to consider issues. It's the duty of the councilors to be there. I don't really think that they should necessarily wait. I just was saying that from the horse race politics side of it. It was interesting that they actually did have the votes to defeat it.
I think another interesting side of it, and just full disclosure, I'm personally probably considerably more conservative politically than your average bear in Alexandria, and I have a bias toward private property, right? And I am personally, so I'm not talking as a reporter now, just Dan the citizen. I'm personally uncomfortable with the idea that you know, I mean, like, so there's going to be smells that offend the dog businesses. I guess part of me says, like, well, who cares? I mean, what, you don't want the city council to in your view, give a benefit to this business, but you're asking for the exact same thing. Like, they bought and paid for this land. I don't know why, you know. So it seemed like kind of a talking out of both sides of the mouth part.
Yeah.
I would personally be biased toward, it's your land,
Well,
like,
no,
as long as you're not like dumping toxic sludge in your front yard.
So you
like,
mentioned the dog businesses, but there's also a pizza restaurant that's opening up around the corner. There's a barbecue restaurant.
do you think
that's
they have a
opening up
barbecue
around the
chicken
Well,
pizza?
it's all
option?
food.
What was it?
It's all food.
Well, the point is, if you're running a restaurant, what you don't want is foul odors in your neighborhood, right? I mean, so-
FOWL.
Foul, yeah. Unpleasant odors in your neighborhood. And so that might be a lingering source of tension in that neighborhood.
All right, well, let's wrap up our discussion with the issue of Seminary Road. City officials would like to remove a traffic lane from Seminary Road. Dan, how do you think this will ensue, and what will the neighbors think?
Well, the city officials probably would not say at this point that they're gunning for that. I mean, they probably are, but they are trying very hard to make sure that it at least looks like a publicly informed process. And the neighbors are already incensed about it. Just earlier this week, or maybe a week around Easter Sunday, I think, a resident in the area began circulating an online survey, a petition, where people can e-sign it, and within days they got almost like 800 e-signatures on this petition opposing the reduction of vehicular lanes for the addition of bike lanes. And I found that to be interesting because, I mean, I cover a lot of the political venues here, and I personally don't find a lot of the public testimony particularly compelling, not in its content, but just in like if 3 people show up to a planning commission meeting to gripe about something, I don't really know what that means. That's not very representative, but when 800 people sign a petition, that starts to sound like a lot more compelling sample size to me. So that many people came out of the gate this early on in opposing that. I've lived here and reported here for 3 years, and I've seen few things generate that much opposition so early on in the process. So yeah, neighbors are definitely, a lot of neighbors, at least 800 neighbors, are quite against it. I'm sure there are others in favor, but I haven't heard from any of them.
Do you have any thoughts on this, Michael?
So one thing that's interesting to think about when you think about what's being proposed on Seminary Road is it is almost an ideal carbon copy to what happened on King Street right here at T.C. Williams. So what has been the experience here at T.C. Williams? Well, the number of crashes reduced by 50% and since they made the changes here. The vehicle speed has been reduced by 18%. And it is true that the commute times increased in the morning rush hour and the afternoon rush hour, and the increase was 30 seconds. So I think the experience here on King Street is providing some data for what the city wants to do on Seminary.
And we have had a couple of people contact the Alexandria Times with some research that they have done. And I haven't fact-checked this, so I am sort of, it seems legitimate. The stretch of Seminary Road where they're considering doing this is actually one of the safest stretches of road pertaining to accidents in the city. There's a different stretch of Seminary Road where the bike lanes are not being put in, which is where there have been accidents and fatalities. So the premise to me is flawed as to the reason that they're doing it on this particular stretch of Seminary Road. So I have a hard time sort of getting beyond that I think this fits into a larger philosophy of a lot of the transportation staff in the city, that cars are bad and let's try to find ways to make it more uncomfortable for people to drive their cars. I think the scooters are part of that.
Well, divorcing the scooters from the conversation for a second, that is an
It's hard to give
actual
up.
stated city philosophy, which is called Complete Streets, right? This is their Complete Streets program, is to discourage the use of automobiles and encourage the use of other modes of transportation. And so they actually are trying to do this.
Well,
Yeah, and
I've questioned them about Jan Lambert, who's the head of the Transportation and Environmental Services. He probably, because he's being politically careful, I would imagine, I asked him point blank if the city's policy is to discourage, like actively to discourage driving, and he said no, it's to actively provide alternative modes. I think that the logical reason for that is they're trying to get people to take other modes, but they're not trying to tell people that they can't drive or to actively disincentivize it with higher fees and less parking.
Well, they are.
Maybe
They're taking away the parking, and they're taking away lanes, and they're making it more difficult to drive places, and you have to battle with bikes and helmetless scooter riders as you're going places. So yeah, I think they are. I think it's a very active war on cars.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you guys so much. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you for tuning in, and join us next time on Behind the Headlines.